That's better. As I was saying, today is a very special day for me and horror fans from all around the world. Because 100 years ago today, Nosferatu was released. Now, I'm not going to give a in-depth reason as of right now of why Nosferatu is so important to me. Because it is a very long story, and I've decided to make it its own video. Before I go any further, I do want to say that this video is not an in-depth history of Nosferatu. Sadly, I just did not have the time to make that kind of video. But I do plan on making one in the near future, possibly my 22nd video. But I wanted to do something for the film's 100th anniversary. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the movie.
Nosferatu was directed by F.W. Murnau and starred Max Schreck as Count Orlok. The film tells the story of a young real estate agent named Hutter who gets an assignment to travel to a far-off land to sell a piece of property to a count named Orlok. Once he arrives at Orlok's castle, Hutter quickly starts to feel uncomfortable with his host. When he wakes up in the morning, Hutter finds two small holes on the side of his neck, but brushes it off as mosquito bites. However, Hutter quickly realizes the horrors of the situation that he is in and tries to find a way out.
What happens next, you ask? Well, you just have to watch the film to find out. Now, you may be asking yourself, man, that plot description sounds awfully familiar.
That is because you probably have heard of it before, because it comes straight from one of the most famous books ever written, Dracula.
You may also be metaphorically asking yourself, wait, didn't you say that the real estate agent's name was Hutter, and that the count's name is Orlok? Why isn't it Jonathan and Dracula? Well, there was actually a really good reason for that. The film studio behind Nosferatu, Piranha Films, didn't get the rights to the novel. So, to help make it seem like the film had its own original story, the studio changed all the characters' names and even added in a plague subplot.
So, instead of Jonathan Harker, you now have Hutter. Mina is Ellen, Dracula is Orlok, and Renfield is Knock.
What makes the situation all the more interesting is the fact that this wasn't director F.W. Murnau's first time being involved in an unauthorized film adaptation.
In fact, 2 years earlier in 1920, F.W. I Like to Make Unauthorized Film Adaptation of classic horror literature Murnau directed The Head of Janus, which, you may have guessed, was an unauthorized film adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson's novella, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Sadly, the film is now lost, but with the information that we do have on the film, we know that much like with Nosferatu, the characters' names were changed. For example, Dr. Jekyll is now Dr. Warren, and Mr. Hyde is Mr. O'Connor. I will go more in depth on the Head of Janus in a later video, but I do quickly want to mention that the actor who played the roles of Dr. Warren and Mr. O'Connor in the film was Conrad Veidt, who played Caesar in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari the same year.
Now, back to Nosferatu. Even with all these changes that the filmmakers made, it was still obvious to many that Nosferatu was a Dracula adaptation. Stoker's widow, Florence Balcom, sued Piranha Film for copyright infringement. The court sided with Balcom and ordered all copies of the film to be destroyed. Thankfully, though, the film had already made its way around the world making it so that many copies survived.
In 1979, Werner Herzog remade Nosferatu as Nosferatu the Vampire in both English and German.
Herzog did decide not to use the names from the original film, but instead from the Dracula novel. This is because by the time that the film was actually made, the novel had actually fallen into the public domain. Now, speaking of Herzog's remake, I actually find the remake to actually be really good, with the exception of the ending, which made me so mad it nearly ruined the whole film for me.
Speaking of remakes, there is actually 2 more remakes in the works right now. One by David Lee Fisher, who had previously remade The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in 2005, and the other remake by Robert Eggers, director of The Witch and The Lighthouse.
The legacy of Nosferatu cannot be understated. Heck, it was Nosferatu that invented the concept of sunlight killing vampires. Dracula, the world's most famous vampire, who has died countless times by sunlight in both film and in other forms of media, actually walks around in daylight in the original novel. Besides that, Nosferatu has been the inspiration for many different things over the years.
Blue Oyster Cult's 1977 album, Spectres, ended with the song Nosferatu, based on the film, and even Freddy Krueger's redesign in Wes Craven's New Nightmare from 1994 was based on Count Orlok. Freddy even recreates the famous shadow. One of the most interesting things that was inspired by Nosferatu is the 2000s film Shadow of the Vampire.
It is a fictionalized telling of the making of Nosferatu. In the film, instead of Max Schreck being an actor, he is a real vampire. Believe it or not, this is actually based on real rumors that existed at the time of the original Nosferatu's release that said that Max Schreck was indeed a real vampire and that Nosferatu was the only film that he ever made.
Even after 100 years after its release, Nosferatu is still alive and well in the world of pop culture, with Count Orlok appearing on the cover of magazines, getting new figures, and even appearing in 2 episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants, most notably the Season 2 episode Graveyard Shift. I'm happy to say that I don't think Nosferatu is going anywhere anytime soon.
I think I've kept you all here long enough. I really hope you all enjoyed the video. If there is a movie or film topic that you would like to see me discuss in a video, please leave a comment down below. I hope you all have a wonderful day.